Print format codes as well. And this is just fancy syntax for saying plug in some actual value here. Don't print out %s literally. This is a placeholder for what will be s, a string. Well, what do I want to put there? Here's something new too. In Scratch, if you had two inputs to a function, you would have two ovals like this and this one here that you could either type words or numbers into or drag variables into. In C, there's no notion of ovals or graphics at all. So instead, we're just going to go old school and just use a comma. If you use a comma in between the parentheses as the arguments or inputs to a function, that's going to separate the one on the left from the one on the right, thereby being analogous to having two ovals in the world of Scratch. Now, there's something that's potentially a little visually confusing here. There's actually two commas here, of course, and here. But notice the important detail. That first one, that's an English grammatical comma that I've put inside of my quoted string, my quoted phrase of text. That has nothing to do with programming. That just has everything to do with English. The fact that this comma is outside of those double quotes, though, means it's significant in this language called C, and it separates first argument from second argument. And so in this way, do we have the ability now to also say something on the screen using printf in this slightly new way. So let me go ahead then and do this for real. Let me go back to CS50 IDE, and I'm going to go ahead and go back into this program here and consider for just a moment how we can improve upon this very first program, which literally just prints hello world. Not that interesting. I can run it all day long. It's going to say the same thing. How do I now get input from the user? Well, it turns out that I can simply enhance this code a little bit. Let me go ahead and, per the translation of Scratch earlier, let me do something like string answer equals get underscore string, quote unquote, what's your name? So I'm literally typing out what we saw in C a moment ago. I'm going to remember my semicolon over here. And then I have to change this second line of code now to not say hello, comma, world, but instead to say hello, comma, %s. And then outside of the double quotes, I'm going to do a comma and then provide literally the word answer, which is the name of that variable. But I'm not quite done. And this is a little subtle. And invariably, you'll forget this at some point too. In order to use getString, I have to use this thing called the CS50 library, code that the staff wrote that you don't have default access to. And in order to do that, I need to add one line of code that we'll explain in more detail in a little bit. But for now, just take it on faith that by adding this line of code at the very top, include CS50.h, that will now give me access to the getString function, which I otherwise wouldn't have access to. All right, now I'm going to go back to the terminal window and notice the dichotomy here. If I just run /hello sort of enthusiastically, let's see what my new program does, I'm about to be unfortunately disappointed because it still says hello world. And you might realize intuitively what the problem, of course, here is. I haven't actually recompiled the code. And so anytime you make a change to your code, it does not suffice to just save the file via file save or control or command S. I need to recompile it. And to recompile my code, that's not such a big deal. I just type make hello, enter, cross my fingers that there's no yellow or red scary text. This is all good. It seems to have compiled into machine code. Now I can retype /hello and enter. And you'll see now my program is running and waiting for me. Let me go ahead and type my name, David, enter, hello, comma, David. Let me go ahead and run it again after clearing the screen. Let me run it again. And this time, let's say my name is Brian, and I see hello, comma, Brian. So quite similar to what we did in Scratch, but now we're more powerfully doing this all thus far via my keyboard alone. All right, so that was a lot. We wrote hello world super quickly off the top of my memory and then enhanced it to now take input from the user. Let me pause here if there are any questions. You're welcome to ask via chat for either staff or classmates to answer. But if you'd like to raise your virtual hand in Zoom, please feel free so that I can clarify or expound on anything here. Yeah, question from Ryan.
Yeah, I'd asked this in the chat, but so the string before the answer, that's not the name of the variable. So you could hypothetically make it like you could make it like string A or string anything else. It just matters what comes after string is the name of the variable.
Exactly. Really good question. In the world of Scratch, you were required to use the variable called answer. In C, we have the complete flexibility over what we want to do. So as Ryan proposed, I could change my variable's name to just A for short. I would have to change it elsewhere too to make clear that the variable being used is the same one by a different name. That's perfectly fine. But here's where we now get into a matter of better style. Having a variable called just A doesn't really lend itself to the readability of your code. I might now glance at my code and be like, what is the variable A? It's a little better when it comes to writing good code to actually be more verbose and using an actual word like answer in this case. Indeed, even though I keep describing x and y and z as the go-to variables for a mathematician, those really say nothing outside the context of like a Cartesian plane. So in a program that you write in C or Scratch or anything else, using descriptive variable names is a matter of good style as well. Jonathan, over to you.
Yeah, just a quick question. How come we have to compile the code every single time? And unlike different IDEs, which if you just run the code, it automatically compiles. Why do we have to manually do it?
Yeah, really good question. Why do you have to keep recompiling the code? Short answer is just because. This is the way C is. It's an older language, decades now old. And so back then, everything was very deliberate. User interface was not the top priority. Performance instead was, for instance. And so nowadays, there are fancier integrated development environments. And some of you might have used things like Codecademy Online or code.org, where there's very often like literally a play button that you can just click in the user interface, and it just plays your program or runs your program. What we're doing in this class is showing you what those buttons are doing. So if you do use an environment like that that seems to automate this, it's still happening. But for our purposes, certainly at the beginning of the semester, we're going to do it manually ourselves. Later in the term, when we introduce a different language altogether, for instance, Python, then kind of, sort of, you don't need to compile anymore. But more on that in a few weeks. Good question. Sophia, over to you.
I had a question about, I noticed in the source code that there's a \n at the end of the string. Is that necessary for every time, even if it's just one line?
Really good question. This \n that you're seeing elsewhere, a bit of a spoiler, but yeah, let's go ahead and fix this problem that we've seen, even though I'm kind of ignoring it. You know, this now gets a little particular, but this looks kind of stupid, honestly. It says hello, comma, Brian, $$ Like that is not my intended output. I literally only wanted to say hello, Brian, or hello, David. This visual artifact here, the $ and the tilde and the slash, have to do with my terminal window, this command line environment that I'm using. And honestly, just to be a little nitpicky, frankly, it should probably be on a new line. It should just be on its own line so it's not confused with my own output. And as Sophia notes, there is a solution to this. But again, per last week, you need to be, when writing algorithms and in turn code, you have to be super precise. Nowhere in my code have I told the computer to move the cursor to the next line. So I can do that explicitly by doing \n immediately after the %s, but still inside of the double quotes. This is shorthand notation for what would be telling the computer, move the cursor to the next line. Now, you might think that, well, why don't I just hit enter like this? And even though this all might be new to most of us, suffice it to say that this just feels like it's going to get messy quickly. If you start hitting enter in the middle of your code, that's probably not the right solution. So instead, programmers years ago decided to come up with shorthand notation like \n, otherwise known as an escape character, that signals to the computer, put a new line here. So \n is new line. And let me go ahead and recompile this after saving my file. Let me go ahead and do make hello.